Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the ConTinual Comics Lair. We're sponsored by Heroes Aren't Hard to Find and Heroes Convention. I'm your host, Nancy Northcott. This panel will discuss the DC Titans from Sidekicks to Grown-Ups. And there's a spoiler alert here. There is the Titans TV show in progress, and I assume you know that if you're interested enough to be watching this panel. So be aware that there will be spoilers for that TV show. So you might want to come back and watch it later. So we'll start by asking the panel to introduce themselves and tell us a little about how they became interested in the Titans. And Steve, will you start?
Sure. I'm Steve Sellers. I write comics for Omen Comics and Revelation Comics. My own superhero comic Blitz, as well as a cult detective series called White Druid and Michael Nero, a time travel fantasy book called Guardians of the Lamb. And most recently, I've been working on a science fiction anthology called Blood World for Raincross Press. So I'm kind of involved mainly with those things for right now. Beyond that, as far as the Titans are concerned, that goes back ages. I was always aware of them on some level. I mean, I knew that, I knew the book was out. I never really read it when I was a kid. I kind of grew up with Dick Grayson, though, and that was kind of like my entryway into the Titans. When Dick Grayson became Nightwing later on, I kind of discovered that. And I just saw him on a card, and I'm like, wow, that's a really cool character. Who is he? And then it's like, oh, that was Robin. And then the idea of like these teen heroes becoming like adult heroes was just like so awesome to me. And then I found out about Wally West being the Flash and all these other things. And I got into the Devin Grayson Titans for a while, and then kind of went back and read all the Marv Wolfman and George Perez stuff. And so that was pretty much the formation of my Titans fandom.
Okay, Ange.
Hey, I'm Dr. Ange, and I've been reading DC Comics for a long, long time now. And while there are certain groups like Legion or the Super Family that I'm always reading, the Titans are kind of a property that I kind of dive in and dive out, or jump on and jump off. And so I can remember the stuff from the mid 70s when it was sort of brought back. And then I was there when New Teen Titans by Wolfman and Perez hit the stands, and followed them into the Baxter series, and then kind of nibbled a little bit thereafter, a little bit with Gail Simone, a little bit with Jeff Johns. Always intrigued by the different groups, and always intrigued really by the C-listers that occasionally join the team, like Hawk and Dove and people like that. And I would say, as a DC Comics guy, Legacy has always intrigued me, and so it has been fascinating to see the Titans sort of go, now that they're sort of mainstream, not Sidekicks anymore, and you have things like Young Justice and other groups like that sort of taking on that mantle of young generation, and what that means to the older generation, which then becomes sort of aged up. So I'm here to talk mostly about the comics, although I've watched a little bit of the television series as well.
Okay, Elektra.
I got interested in comics back when I was, I'm Elektra Hammond. I'm a writer and an editor, and I got way into superhero comics around the time I was in college. My interest in Titans started with New Teen Titans, because I was mostly a Marvel person, and that really piqued my interest, and I started reading that a whole lot. And the TV series brought me back into it. The spike in all the Marvel movies and TV brought me right back into comics again. And I've been watching everything superhero and starting to read superhero comics again, and it's been a lot of fun.
Wayland?
I write under the name Wayland Smith. I've been reading comics pretty steadily since the, mid 80s or so. I write a series about superhuman mercenaries, which is a lot of my sales have been superhero related. And I got into the Titans definitely during the Wolfman and Perez run back on New Teen Titans. I loved that the sort of afterthought Sidekicks were getting some credit for a while. I always thought of it more as like the squires of the original knights were finally getting a chance to put on their own armor. And I developed one or two favorite characters along the way.
And he matches your shirt so nicely.
He does.
Yeah. Kristen?
Hello, I'm Kristen Geaman. I'm a medieval historian in regular life, and I read some comics when I was younger, and I watched Batman the Animated Series, and it was when I was in grad school and my brain was hurting from all of the academic work that I got back into reading comics. And I had originally liked Robin, the sidekick character from Batman the Animated Series, and my mind was blown when my dad was like, you know, he's not Robin anymore. They're on the third. That might actually have been around the time they were on the fourth Robin. So I was like, what? So that's actually how I got into New Teen Titans, was because they're like, this is when Robin stops being Robin. And so I had to know what was up. And they had them at the library. And also, actually, New Teen Titans was pretty cheap to buy at conventions if you didn't have them to start with. So that's kind of how I got back in. And then as a historian, I enjoy reading the original Teen Titans from the 60s. It's good for a laugh. And then I've kept up with the other stuff, and I watch the TV shows. I even watched Teen Titans Go.
Chris?
Sorry, I've got a phone ringing in the background here. I'm Chris Cavett. I am not now, nor have I ever been a comic book professional or any type of creative person with any creativity at all. I work in the IT field. I discovered the Titans with the second half of the Silver Age run. My father bought them for me from a neighbor who was selling them at a garage sale. They belonged to his daughter, who was a few years older than I was. So my first experience with the Titans was those strange issues with Mr. Jupiter and Narc and Lilith and Mal, but I loved them. And then I was a little bit disappointed with the 1977 or so revival, but rediscovered my love for the Titans with the New Teen Titans Wolfman Perez run. I've been a fan ever since.
Well, and I remember the original Titans run when it was Robin and Aqualad and Kid Flash and Wonder Girl. And that's really when I started reading them and paying attention to them. And I remember that same era that Chris remembers, when they fought the Mad Mod and a character who was based on the disc jockey Wolfman Jack. And I mean, when I think back on those stories, yeah, they were kind of silly, but I was at the right age to love kid heroes. I loved the Legion of Superheroes. I loved Superboy when DC still allowed him to exist, you know, in his original incarnation, not any of his current ones. I loved Supergirl. So Teen Titans were like made for me to enjoy reading. And I've kind of stuck with them ever since. And so the thing about Titans, as you've noticed if you're a fan, is that there are a lot of different incarnations of the Titans. So what we're going to do this evening is kind of focus in on some of them. We're not going to cover everything because there's too much to cover in an hour. So to kick things off, I'd like to ask everybody to tell us, in the many incarnations of the Titans, which are your favorite Titans and why? Ange, will you start?
Sure. I've always been a Wally West guy. I've always been a Kid Flash guy. And so I would say, you know, his role in the early 70s sort of stuff was definitely my gateway in. I was sort of looking at the Flash comic a lot, and I really liked the fact that there was a super speedster that was a sidekick. And so I followed that into the New Teen Titans and really liked his sort of arc as he kind of got sick of being a superhero and sort of struggled with the fact that he had powers and maybe didn't want to do that. And then, of course, he's the one that really first takes up the mantle of the legacy hero that he followed. So I really, really like Wally. I've always been a fan of Donna Troy. I think it's very difficult to say which Donna Troy because, as we sort of mentioned before we started the tape, there are so many origins, it's hard to know. But I think that she always seemed to, I think, to be sort of like the soul of the Titans, I would say, in the Wolfman Perez. I know that Nightwing is the leader, but she kind of was, I felt like the glue that kind of sort of held that team together. So I think for those groups, it would probably be those two. Moving into later incarnations, I'm kind of a Connell kind of a guy. I kind of liked Connell and Tim Drake and Wonder Girl as kind of a new trinity. in later runs of the book. And I thought that they played off each other very, very well. So those would probably be my favorite. But if you made me say which one, it would definitely be Yellow Suited, No Full Cowl, Wally West. Like that was just, that was just mainstream superheroes into my young veins.
Okay, Elektra.
I came into superheroes originally through Batman, and so watching the various incarnations of Robin and watching him turn into Nightwing just really did it for me. So I've been solidly into just Robin / Nightwing, allowing him to grow up and really be a superhero on his own. So just put me right solidly into that piece of things, with maybe a side trip out for Aqualad, because I've got a soft spot for people under the sea.
Wayland.
Favorite version of the team, I'd probably go with New Teen Titans. It was just such a phenomenal run, and so many pivotal things happened in there. I think, well, actually, one of my favorite moments was when they did the crossover with the Outsiders, and Batman tries to take charge and tell everyone exactly what they're going to do, and Dick finally had enough and turned around and said, "No, that's not working. Here's what's going to happen." And Batman actually stepped back and let him do it, which, if you know Batman, is a major sign of respect. Favorite individual character? Well, I mean, that's fairly apparent for me, I think. But I love the team. I love the concept. I love the idea of them working out from under the shadow of their various mentors. And it's been very interesting watching their rise and fall in various ways at DC. And I have a lot of theories on that, but I'll save that for a little later.
Okay. Kristen?
I feel like I'm just kind of repeating what a lot of other people have said. Dick's always been my favorite, so if he's in it, I'll read it. Sometimes that means I'm reading some real dross, but whatever, I'll read it. So any of the versions that have him in it is fine. I do get a kick out of the older ones. I kind of like how cheesy they are. I do think, yeah, in terms of good storytelling, the New Teen Titans, probably up until about Donna gets reinvented around like 50, is really stellar. But yeah, I'll read all of them. Tiny Titans, that's when you're looking for something cute, that's a good one too. So really, any of them work for me.
Okay. Chris?
Wally was my favorite when I was a kid. One of the first comic books I had was 80-page giant Flash that reprinted, I think it was Land of the Golden Giants or something like that, with a team up with the Flash and Kid Flash, and he was my favorite character, or my favorite sidekick for sure. Over the years, I've come to like Donna, and I know I'm dating myself here, but of the new characters, I think I like Raven the best. Just that struggle to contain the darkness and not be consumed by it, always found fascinating.
Well, it'll come to no surprise to anybody who knows me that I'm going to pick Dick as my favorite type, but Donna would be a close second. And one of the things I've always enjoyed about the series that really was emphasized in the Wolfman Perez run was the dynamic of Dick and Donna having kind of a brother-sister close relationship. And that's kind of fallen by the wayside, as a lot of things that all of us like, I'm sure, have fallen by the wayside in recent years. But I really like that aspect of it. And I think one reason I liked the New Teen Titans so much was because it was less sunny. It wasn't dark, but it was less sunny than the original run that I remember reading. And so there seemed to be, in general, higher stakes in those stories and more on the line. And in turn, that kind of developed the characters. And I had a soft spot for Beast Boy's relationship with Cyborg, or Changeling's relationship with Cyborg, I guess we should call him. But we'll talk about them, a little bit down the line. We touched briefly on Donna's mini origins. And there's several Titans who seem like they've kind of gotten twisted into pretzels in either different runs of the Titans or in other books. for example, Roy Harper / Speedy / Arsenal / whoever he is this week. People are nodding, so I'm assuming that people have something to weigh in on about Roy, and kind of hit the path that he's taken. What do you think of it? Where do you think he should go from here? Elektra, do you want to start?
I'm not super familiar with him. I don't have a whole lot to say.
Okay. Wayland?
Roy is another character I've always really liked. I think he is probably maybe one of the individual characters that suffered the most when DC did that horrid reboot several years ago. I've also always found it interesting that you know so much about the backgrounds of so many characters. And then with Roy, it's his father was a park ranger who died in some kind of a fire. And up until a few years ago, his mother, absolutely nothing had ever been written about. And he's gone from rich boys ward like Dick was to adopted and raised in the Navajo Nation. All the storylines we've done with him. I loved what he was right before the reboot happened, where he'd grown up and faced his demons and had the addiction under control, was raising Leon, who I thought was a great character with amazing potential. And then they just decided to throw all of that away.
Yeah.
And I wish some version of him would show up on Titans aside from a name on a phone.
Well, yeah, they do talk about him from time to time, so maybe that's a hint, but of course not so far. Steve, I just realized I skipped you on the last question. Will you tell us which is your favorite Titan and which version and why?
Yeah, I was actually going to ask that, and actually the discussion with Roy does kind of dovetail into that question. So that this is a good time to get to that. Yeah, my favorites, obviously Nightwing. That was the character I got into Titans with. I still love him now. I love that he's one of the few characters DC has allowed to grow in any meaningful way. The other one, of course, being Wally West, who is another one of my big favorites. And really, I think with Wally, I kind of loved him because of Mark Waid's run on The Flash, more than because of Titans itself. You know, that run, and then that phenomenal amount of growth that he had into the first Jeff Johns run on Flash, and now the stuff under Jeremy Adams, which is very good. So I just love that whole trajectory of him starting off as this immature kid and then becoming this dad with these 3 kids, you know, and trying to balance that with being a superhero. I just love that about him. But in terms of other Titans, Raven is another one I would have mentioned. I think that and I have to specifically say the Raven that was in the Wolfman Perez run, because I really do not like the way that she has been reinvented in modern versions. I don't like this goth girl thing. I like her as this very elegant, reserved character. And it seems like she's lost a lot of her grace and her dignity that she used to have with all these reinventions, and I just can't stand that. And then beyond that, I would say Roy, which I'll get into, and also Connell, but he's another one that I liked before he joined the Titans. I was a big fan of the Carl Kiesel, Tom Grummett run, and when he was actually having fun and before he had all these daddy issues with Lex Luthor, I'm just yeah. But I mean, those characters are really, really great. And Roy, because of what Wayland said a minute ago, because he was the guy that kind of had his demons, he had his problems with addiction, you know, he made a lot of mistakes. But what did he end up doing? You know, he ended up being a father, and being a father gave him the maturity to grow up and become more of a real hero. And he even joined the Justice League at one point. And then came Cry for Justice, and then the reboot, and he's been on his way down since, and nobody seems to know what to do with him, sadly.
Okay. So Kristen, what do you think about Roy's tortured path?
I have mixed. I like Roy, and I like the idea of Roy, but for me, it really depends on how he's being written, because sometimes, like more so than other characters, because he has that kind of bombastic streak that's maybe trying to cover for insecurity or whatever, but with a writer who doesn't seem to get Roy as well or doesn't know what they're doing, it very quickly veers into misogyny, and they make him, you know, just kind of treating women as disposable and this kind of stuff, and I don't like it when they do that, and I don't think that's actually what the character is, but I think sometimes particularly if you're writing a team book and you have a lot of characters, sometimes writers will slot people into their one-trick ponies, and Roy gets too much slotted into the bad boy player role, which I don't think that's who he has to be. I liked there's that one Action Comics Weekly from the 80s where he has to go rescue Leon, and he's like, I need help, Dick, let's go rescue my daughter. I think it's Ireland, right? And that's really good, and I think he's really well done, and I think he has some good moments in Outsiders as well, but sometimes he's just kind of annoying in in other issues if the writer's not doing a good job.
Chris?
Don't have much to add. I don't like the Roy, who's dark and not, like you said, almost misogynistic sometimes. I haven't liked those portrayals of him. I really think back to him in the early days before the Green Arrow reboot, when he was the smiley, happy kid in the bright red costume. And that's the Roy I like the most.
Steve, did you want to add anything to what you said before about Roy?
Not a whole lot. I think that we pretty much covered Roy. The thing of it is like, yeah, he's a character who's kind of edgy, and he's done some stupid stuff in his life, and he made a lot of mistakes. He got enrolled with the wrong woman, you know, all these kinds of things. He he's a character who could have been a tragic hero, but I think he should be that character that moves past those things. That he kind of puts them know what to do with him, or that he hasn't had the right writer to handle him.
Yeah, Ange?
Yeah, I think I'll just sort of put some sprinkles on the ice cream that everybody else has said, right? You mentioned that New Teen Titans, everybody had some stakes, and that was true with Speedy, where he kind of was in and out of that team, and then suddenly he has a kid, and he suddenly has to mature and become a dad, and that was a great arc, right? Suddenly he has to have some responsibility in life. And then it's, as people have said, like DC is sort of like, what do we do with them? We can't really, to call him Speedy sounds, he's too old for that. So let's call him Arsenal. And now let's make him Red Arrow. And he has like the Van Dyke and the exact same costume as Green Arrow. And then, Cry for Justice happens. And, Supergirl wasn't treated very well in that, but Roy really wasn't treated very well, right? His arm gets ripped off, Leon dies. Then there's some issue where he's so out of it, maybe he's on drugs or deluded, that he tries to shoot a dead cat as an arrow. It becomes a joke throughout comicdom that people are like, what the heck was going on with that? And then he gets rebooted as the trucker hat, really misogynist in Red Hood and the Outlaws, written by Scott Blundell, which was just a terrible book, and so it's like all of this stuff is done to make him a character that's like, oh, matured and grown, and look at this character arc, and then it just kind of all gets undone. You just want to go back to a time where it's like, no, this was the sweet spot for him. He had been the bad boy with troubles in his past. Now he's like a responsible father to show that you can grow and you can be a hero in different sort of ways. And then all that sort of got undone. But I mean, the New 52 did a lot of bad things. It certainly didn't help Roy.
Yeah, I was in high school, and a friend of mine had all of the Adams, O'Neill, Green Arrow, Green Lantern books. And those were amazing books. And that included the story about Roy's addiction, which set up a nice little bond between Roy and Dinah, who, for those of you who may not know or watching, is the Black Canary, because she was the one who really stood by Roy and helped him through that rough time. And the story that Kristen mentioned with Dick and Roy going out to look for Leanne is one of my favorite stories among the Titans. And I sort of sympathize with the people on Twitter who got all upset because there was one little panel of Jason and Roy talking in the hospital after Gar was injured in Dark Crisis. And Jason says, "Don't worry, brother, we'll find her." And so there are always people who react very strongly to things like that and who were very upset. It's like, can't they have their own story? Why are you taking Dick's story and giving it to Roy? And I don't think it's that, but it's not going to be an original story because Roy and Dick already did that if they go and do it. And so how are you going to do it differently? And one of the things that I liked about Leanne was the dynamic that she brought to the Titans, which, if I remember correctly, was mostly demonstrated in Outsiders, when they would go to the diner with Leanne and something about fish sticks for Uncle Gilhead, and Aqualette's going, Aqualette, it's Aqualette or Garth, I forget which it is now. And the sort of playful attitude that they all had with Leanne. I mean, you can't write a comic book of that, but a scene here and there is a nice break from, oh my gosh, the fate of the world is at stake. We have to run off and hope we don't die. It's a nice little break, and they kind of destroyed that. And in my opinion, which we'll get to if we have time, they ruined a chance to bring that back. But since Raven's been mentioned, let's talk about the many changes of Raven. From the elegant daughter of Trigon with a secret who manipulated people to joining the Titans, to goth girl de-aged so she can date Damian Wayne. What do you think about that process, and where do you like her best? Some of you have already answered that, but you can amplify what you said. Elektra, you want to start this one?
Sure. I liked her early on when they started playing games with de-aging her and changing what she was doing. I felt at home and comfortable with the character and what she could do. And when they start changing things around like that, I'm suddenly uncomfortable with the character, which is a weird way to say it. But I thought I knew what was going on, and then I didn't.
Yeah.
And it weirds me out a little bit, and then I don't like the character as much, which is rude of me, but that's just where I am. I liked her the way they started. I got comfortable, and that's where I am. It's not like I stopped reading the book, but.
Wayland?
I really liked her original version. The iconic action they'd give her when she would teleport in somewhere with the cloak billowing up behind her. And she was one of the very few heroes around who could actually heal people, which is a power that you almost never see used. I loved all of that. I loved her maturity in her background, and I understand why she manipulated the new Teen Titans into happening. And I would agree that as soon as they de-aged her all of a sudden and threw her with Gar originally, I did not like that. I did not see the reason behind it, and I still don't. She can be a phenomenal character. I'm not as wild about the current version with her being much younger and behind sort of all of the other Titans she used to be on par with.
Kristen?
Kind of what everybody else has already said. Definitely prefer the original version. All of the de-aging gets very confused. I don't totally understand what all has happened to her, other than that, yes, she's gotten younger. I think that's kind of a problem with DC in general, de-aging everybody, but particularly de-aging women, because they've decided they want them to be somebody's romantic interest. Like, Barbara has been de-aged a lot. Raven is just like the latest version of it. It's very difficult to keep straight. I don't mind so much when Raven is obviously younger and kind of, you know, a little more goth in the cartoons that are for kids, because I think that works fine for children, and the original Raven is maybe it's kind of hard when you're 7 or whatever to get that. But yeah, I kind of wish they didn't have to change it in the comics as well. You can have both of those coexist. So yes, I liked her much better when she was originally done. Also, it's like people are allowed to get older.
Okay, Chris?
Another vote for the original version of her in the comics. I enjoyed the interactions with Wally in the original comics. Again, not a fan of her being de-aged in the comics. but I think it's made her one of the more interesting characters in the live action TV show, being younger when she discovers who she is and the source of her powers. It makes it even more terrifying, and I think makes her character more effective being younger. So she's one of the younger Raven is one of my favorite characters in the TV show.
Okay, Steve?
Yeah, I think everybody's pretty much covered it. She's just so much better in the Wolfman Perez original version. I feel like she had this sense of mystery that's been lost. Because the interesting thing about her is, yeah, she's the daughter of a demon, but she tries to heal people, which is a point that was brought up. But also a lot of it is it's like she's trying to not be a danger to other people, and because of that, she's always keeping herself under a reserve. This mask of a reserve, and keeping her real self under that, because she can't let her emotions out of control because she's an empath. That's just really, really a fascinating inner conflict. And she starts off manipulating these people for good reasons, and they all have problems with her. But at the same time, over time, they kind of grow together, and they kind of say, okay, yeah, maybe we could have gotten better under a better footing. But you're our friend, and you're part of our group, and and all of this. And I just love that whole angle with her. Yeah, I mean, she reminds me a little bit of Ilyana Rasputin, who's one of my favorite characters as well. So I love that. And I just feel like the way that they keep de-aging her, and DC seems to have a problem, I think, particularly with just taking away the maturity of established characters, not allowing them to grow, and in this case, actually regressing them, which I just think it's done the character no services, unfortunately. And she also suffers from the adaptation problem of, okay, they reinvented her in the adaptation, so let's make the comic version the same way. And then what happens is you take everything distinctive and unique about her in the comics, and it's a disservice, and it's a shame.
Okay. Ange?
Yeah, I think it's a clean sweep for the original take on her, because I think that, as everybody's pointed out, she was a pretty complex character, and that gave her a lot of depth. I'm just going to keep playing off what you said, Nancy, that these were characters where they were high stakes. She's the daughter of a demon. If she gives into her emotions, a lot of bad stuff is going to happen on this planet. So she has to try to control herself as much as possible. By the way, let's throw you into extreme danger and a lot of high volatile situations where maybe you're going to lose control. I thought all of that made her almost like the Dark Phoenix of the Titans, where everybody is always side-eyeing Jean Grey. When is she going to lose control, and when is the Phoenix going to come out, right? Like, when are things just going to hit the fan here? And so I thought those early stories of her were the best. I agree with everybody. This is one of those times where other, like, non-comic interpretations have definitely informed comic interpretations, because the goth version on Teen Titans Go is like, everybody knows that, right? She's the Daria of that group. She's the deadpan, I'm going to make fun of people. And then she's de-aged on the show, and that's a really popular version of her. And then if you tell somebody, oh, she's been around for 40 years now and has been through a lot of stuff, and she's actually an adult, people are like, I don't know if that's the Raven that I necessarily know. So I think that that's one of the reasons why everything has sort of gone the way that it has. One other thing I'll just say is, one of the real great things about that Perez run is that everybody had a different body type. And so when you're on that team and you've got Starfire, who is very, bombshell, and you've got Donna, who is very much an athletic young woman, and then you've got Raven, who is sort of thin, I thought that there was, that was also a good representation of her to sort of talk about different body types that exist in the world, and not everybody is sort of like the same, person. Kudos to Perez for that.
Yeah, well, it's unanimous. I prefer original Raven too. But I agree with Chris and others who have mentioned it that Teen Goth Raven, I thought, worked really well in the present TV show, the HBO Max show. I'm not as familiar with the earlier animated versions, but I don't see why the comics have to match it. And honestly, I think one reason, yeah, Wayland, did you want to say something?
It's a term that it keeps happening. It's a term that I coined years ago called media creep. And whatever the more popular version is, because let's face it, as much as we love comics, not as many people read comics as other things. Yeah. Whatever the outside version is creeps into the comics. When the original live action Flash show was airing, that character had a dog. And in the comics, Wally suddenly had a dog for absolutely no apparent reason. When the X-Men movies were first out, the entire team of the comics switched to those yellow and blue jackets because that's what they were wearing in the movies. And they always do that, and they've never really figured out that the people from the movies and the TV shows are probably not going to start reading the comics. But the hardcore comics fan who's kept them alive all these years get frustrated with the media creep, and they will occasionally stop reading because of it.
Yeah, Spidey had organic web shooters for a short time in the comics, and that's because of the Sam Raimi movie, right? Like, give me a break.
Well, and getting back to what Kristen was saying about they de-age people too much. I think sometimes they do that because male superhero X needs a romantic interest. So they say, which female characters are not currently involved in a relationship in the comic? Oh, this one. Well, she's 10 years older than he is. Well, that's all right. We can fix it. And it's, you know, where I come from, you don't date your sister's boyfriend or your brother's girlfriend, even if they're your ex. Barbara Gordon was Dick's girlfriend. In one of the animated shows, she was Bruce's girlfriend or something. And then there were hints in Three Jokers of some involvement with her and Jason. And it's like, invent another female character. Why don't you? And so I think that's part of one reason they just kind of took young goth Raven and matched her with Damien, who was significantly younger than she is. But if we're going to talk about characters who have different versions in different media, let's talk about Corey. And before we start, I just have to climb on my personal soapbox and say, if you have never read the Wolfman Perez version, go find them, because Corey's eyes are solid green and they don't have pupils. Just had to get that off my chest. If you work for DC, look them up. I'm just taking advantage of my moderator position to stand on my soapbox for a minute. So, you know, the Corey, as I understand it, in the animated show, which I haven't watched as much of, is more sweet and naive. And the Corey we first met has a hard edge. I mean, she's been enslaved, she's been traded, she's been brutalized. She's not going to be naive no matter what else she might be. And then, as I understand it, I've seen her picture in the Outlaws, Red Hood and the Outlaws. I don't read superheroines who wear pasties. So that's about what that comic was. Now, if any of you like that, that's fine. That's up to you. But Wayland, will you start us off and talk a little bit about Corey and which version of her you prefer?
Actually, I got to go back to the de-aging for just a minute, and then I'll go on with Corey. My theory on the de-aging and why the Titans especially get hit on it is every couple of years, somebody wants to come up with a new version of a hero. And we've had how many Robins now? But the problem is, if you track that logic through, Dick should be a lot older than he is, so should all the other Titans. So they keep creating new Robins, new Kid Flashes, new Speedies, but they don't want to age up the Titans, so they just don't know what to do with them, and that's why you have the weird age games going on. As far as Corey goes, I love the Wolfman and Perez version, and yeah, she'd been through a lot of stuff, and she was also trained as a warrior when she was very young. So she wasn't this, I don't know, sickeningly sweet one that pops up in the cartoons a lot. I'm not wild about the live action version. I think she's gotten a little better as time has gone on. I have not seen the current season yet. I'm way behind on all of my hero stuff. But I've loved a lot of incarnations of the character. I too did not really get into Red Hood and the Outlaws in the reboot. I think I read the first issue and put it down and didn't touch that particular title again. But Corey is a wonderful character. She's very, very capable. She has a temper, which is a flaw, but they are consistent, or used to at least be consistent about it, which I liked. And there were a couple of issues of Titans where, even with all these trained detectives and investigators around, she was the one that figured out what was going on ahead of everybody. Because while she's not from around here by a long shot, she's far from stupid, and people lose that because of how she looks.
Kristen?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the original version. And again, I was actually just reading some of the older, once they switch into New Titans, I feel like they do not do as good a job with Corey in the New Titans as they did when it was new Teen Titans. Yeah, she's much more complex. So that's fun. It's nice that she's so open with her emotions. I think that's something you don't get in a lot of superhero comics, and that's really nice that she has that. And that's one thing that, again, it's not my preferred version, but I do understand in the cartoon that, yeah, she's kind of naive, but she is also a little bit sunnier, I think, to kind of talk about some of the positive aspects of emotion. There's kind of a very famous thing where she and Raven get body swapped in one of the cartoons, and Raven's like, how do I deal with this? And Corey's like, you must experience unbridled joy, and that will help you. And I think that's good, because your emotions are not necessarily bad. We don't all have to be Batman, no emotions, kind of thing. So I also like that about Corey, that she experiences her emotions. She's not ashamed of her emotions. And also that in the comic, just because she experiences her emotions doesn't mean that she can't just totally kill you with a starbolt. She's the whole package.
Yep. Chris?
Guess we're on a roll here, agreeing with each other, but I would vote for the original version being my favorite. And to get back to the live action HBO Max show, she's perhaps my least favorite character on that show, or least favorite adaptation. I know she was always, more emotional and maybe more violent than the average human hero, but she just seems like a murderer on the TV show, that just so quick to kill and doesn't seem to give it any thought or ever feel any remorse. I just, when I'm watching the scenes with her, that's when I think the most like, this isn't the Titans I know on this TV show. So
Okay.
I've been disappointed with that portrayal of her.
I didn't mean to cut you off. Were you done?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Steve?
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to really add. I mean, Corey's not like one of my favorite characters, really. She's fine. But I would say, yeah, the original version by Wolfman and Perez is the one that I found the most interesting of all of them. I don't feel like any of the adaptations have really spoken to me at all. Certainly, it seems like a lot of the later versions in the comics have lost their way. Yeah, Red Hood and the Outlaws, that was awful. And then, but there have been times when I've liked her okay, like in the 52 weekly series, that she was fine in there. But it just seems like a lot of the time, they seem to misunderstand like how her emotions work. The whole conflict that she has between being, somebody who is trying to experience emotion in a positive way and trying to spread love and joy, and on the other hand, being a hardcore warrior, not just being a hardcore warrior, but being a princess, which comes with its own set of obligations and duties and things that she has to do. So she should be a complex character, written well she is, and she was under Wolfman and Perez, but I just feel like a lot of the later versions seem to miss a lot of the point.
Okay. Ange?
Yeah, I love this group because there's a lot of resonating between all the things that we say. Her origin is probably, I mean, it's probably darker than Raven's, and Raven is the daughter of a demon who, so like when you talk about her being kidnapped and experimented on and brutalized the way that you do, there's a lot of stuff that could be grist for the mill there. I'll say she, at some point in my mind, sort of graduated to being like not a sidekick and not a Titan anymore, around 52, where all of a sudden she seems to be, I'm an independent hero. I'm not on a team necessarily. active in like a galactic kind of a way. Joined the Rebels in that very short reboot of the Rebels for a while. As like, I'm a cosmic hero now. I'm on my own, right? She was in Cosmic Odyssey, that prestige thing, right? She can step out of Titans quite easily and be her own hero, which I think is great. There is that little bit of media creep, but I will say that one of the few books that I sort of like where media creep works is Jimmy Palmiotti and Amanda Conner did a very short-lived solo series of Starfire back in the DCU YOU run. And if you like Palmiotti and Conner, if you like what they did with Harley Quinn, if you like what they did with Power Girl, you'll probably like what they did with Starfire, which was take her as sort of I'm new to Earth, I'm a stranger in a strange land, but I'm young and I'm living in Florida and I'm beautiful, and that book worked for me. Certainly ignored all of the dark stuff in the past, certainly ignored all of the history that had been brought up. But as a sort of a standalone, maybe like an Elseworld Starfire, if you want to think about it that way, I think it worked. Beautiful art by Emmanuel Lupacchino and Else Chartier, I think, covers by Amanda Conner. So I do think that's one time where the super sweet cartoon character entered into comics and worked well.
Okay. Elektra?
I love the original adaptation, but I gotta give credit to the current TV version. There are times, once she's figured out where she's from and all that, because the amnesia thing wasn't really doing it, that it really works. They gave her a decent uniform and they've got her running around really doing some kick-ass things. I like her attitude and strength of purpose, I think would be the right words. And her strong sense of, I'm going to protect you at all costs. Maybe she's got a different sense of what it takes to decide whether I'm going to kill you or not.
Well, and to Chris's point, she's not quite so quick to do that anymore, as she to just lash out and kill people in this latest season. I actually am current on the show. There are a lot of superhero shows I am not current on, but I am current on that one.
She really owns it.
Yeah,
and that's not an easy part to own.
No, and I think Anna Diop does a really good job with it now that they've finally settled on what they're going to do with her hair. That took them 3 seasons to figure out.
Wasn't even hair to figure out.
I think, kind of piggybacking off what Chris said, with she seems like she's murdering people and this kind of stuff. I actually think that's well, I mean, it is for me personally. That's a problem with Titans as a whole. I feel like everybody is way more murdery than they have ever been in the comics. It does not seem, maybe not as bad this season, but I remember in season 1 and 2 in particular, I was like, if I don't see them saving these people's lives, I just assume they let everybody burn because they would just light stuff on fire and walk away. And then I guess I feel like they're trying to control for that a little bit in season 4, where they went back and they were like, oh, hey, I guess everybody didn't burn up when we lit this asylum on fire. That's cool. But it's taken them 4 seasons to be like, a lot of times in the comics, superheroes save people. They don't just light things on fire and walk away.
Yeah. Well, and all of us are readers, and many of us are fiction writers. And the more complex a character is, the more room you have to play, the more issues you can set up for them, and the more interesting paths you can take them down. So the more simplistic you make the character, the less options there are, the fewer options there are to kind of branch off from there. I can't really add anything to what people have said. My favorite's the original incarnation as well, and not just because of the eye thing, but I didn't read Red Hood and the Outlaws because I don't like it when characters are over sexualized, and I got the vibe that she was off the little bit I looked at. So
she was.
Okay. So I didn't, but we kind of have sort of segued into the other media incarnations. Is there anything anybody wants to say about any of the characters in the comic books before we move on to that? No? Okay, well then what is your favorite adaptation in any other medium and why? And Kristen, you want to start? It's your turn.
Oh no, I don't really want to start though.
Do you want me to come back to you? We can start with Chris instead.
Yeah, sorry, I can't decide yet. I gotta think.
Okay. Chris, do you have a pick?
Maybe the first animated series. It was a little silly for me, but I think when the second one came along, it made the first one look better by comparison. And I really want to like the live action show. It's just amazing to me. When I was a kid reading those Silver Age comics, if you told me there would be a live action Titan show, I never would have believed it. And on some level, it just seems too good to be true. And that little kid in me just wants to love the show. But like what Kristen was saying, just the they've all been a bit murdery, especially in the beginning, and just they don't seem like heroes for the most part. And maybe Donna does. I really like Donna in the new show. Probably Donna and Raven, as I mentioned earlier, my favorite characters in the new show. So I want to say the live action show, but I think I would say the first animated series.
Okay, Steve?
I'll do a slight cop out and say probably the Young Justice series, because it seems in many ways more like a Titan show, especially when you have like Dick Grayson becoming Nightwing in it. I'm like, at that point, it's like, yeah, it's pretty much a Teen Titans show. They're just calling it Young Justice and putting in some Young Justice characters. It's got problems. I fully admit that. The way that they kind of reinterpret, I don't like every single thing that they do. But I will say, and I really don't like that they killed off Wally. What the heck's up with that? But other than that, I really do like a lot of what they did. I like their version of Con-El. I like their version of some of these other characters that they use. I feel like it was more of a DC cartoon in the way that it was meant to be. At least where it draws a lot of ideas from the comics and tries to do their own thing with it while at the same time respecting the core mythology. That's a kind of a hard, tightrope to walk a lot of the time. But I would say, like, of all the ones I've seen, that's come the closest. But I mean, I feel like you could still do better than that.
Ange?
Yeah, I think the first animated series, because I think that started out as a kid show, and then as it progressed, it became like a little bit more in-depth, a little bit more complex, a little bit more mature. That said, nothing got my kids more interested in comics than Teen Titans Go, because that is just like totally irreverent humor, a big hoot. They could watch it and laugh. And then that was kind of like a gateway in many reasons, right? Because they would, they brought Speedy on, they brought Kid Flash on, they brought in a bunch of characters. And, it allowed me to then say like, oh, well, let me show you like what they look like in the comics and try to introduce them that sort of way. But for me, I would say the first animated series. I watched the first season. I'm a huge Hawk and Dove guy. 5 seconds into meeting Hawk, I think he plants a knife in some guy's junk, right? This is not your father's, right, Titans. And maybe I still have like a little bit of rose-colored glasses on that I like my heroes to be heroes and maybe not torture people, but I think it swerved a little bit too dark for me to like totally embrace it.
Okay. Elektra?
I've got a soft spot for the live action. Been waiting forever for there to be live action superheroes. And when they show up, I'm sunk. Although I got to admit, I really, really wish they had gone with the Teen Titans, with the Titans we saw in one episode of that first season when they went back a couple of years, the original Titans that got chased out, that had Wonder Girl and Aqualad. I wanted to see that incarnation with Hawk and Dove and all of them living happily in the tower, because that seemed to be a really happy group of heroes and not, chasing demons per se. but I guess they weren't needed.
Wayland?
Me?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm actually going to go with Steve. I really like a lot of the ideas they've done in Young Justice. They've used several of the characters there and shown them to be mature and competent heroes, which is how I would prefer, especially those first 5 Titans to be, because at this point they've been around for so long. I'm going to take a second and be that comic book geek guy and point out that what everyone's calling the first series isn't, because the first animated Titan series was back in the 1960s, the old Filmation cartoon. But yeah, of the 2 Teen Titans Go incarnations, the first of those 2 was definitely better than them turning into infants who really shouldn't be living on their own, who go around and eat pizza more than they do anything heroic. The live action show has had its moments. I would love to see what Elektra was just talking about. Some of those early adventures of those Titans would have been fantastic. The other thing I would love to see is the way Justice League Unlimited took all of those heroes. We went from the first core 7 to like pretty much every hero in the DC universe. I would love to see some version of Teen Titans Unlimited and do a couple stories with the original core team and then branch out into all of the people who've come and gone from the Titans over the years.
Kristen?
I feel like everybody said all of the good stuff. So I'll just put a plug in for the movie Teen Titans Go versus Teen Titans, because they have an amazing scene where they interact with the multiverse and you get all these different animated versions of the Titans, including the filmation ones and ones from the comics and stuff. And that was kind of cool to see all of the different ones, because yeah, I guess I like Young Justice in that the team is a little bit bigger and it had Dick and Wally being bros, and that was awesome. But I still miss Donna and some of that stuff. And that's kind of one of the sadnesses, I guess, for me with the animated Teen Titans, is that you don't have Donna. I like the core group, but also you're missing a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, I'm really torn because I so much wanted to love the HBO Max series. And I think for the most part, the actors are really well cast. I think they fit their roles and they do a good job with them. But it is darker than my taste and a little bit, especially in the earlier seasons, violent in a way that's slightly uncomfortable. I love my favorite episode of that show, and I've now watched all the episodes there are, is season 1, episode 8, Donna Troy, because the relationship between Dick and Donna is so good in that show. And I liked the episode that had Aqualad in it, but he was kind of stalkery toward Donna. I mean, just turning up and not taking no for an answer. And at some point, no means no. And then she kind of did an about face of, oh, well, I really love you after all. And it's like, could we have an arc in here instead of a turn on a dime kind of thing? But I thought the actor was really good. The costume was good. I thought the way they used his powers was great. And so I would have liked to have seen more with them as well. And let's not even just talk about the way Donna died in the show. So I think I probably also have to go with the original animated series, because I haven't seen the whole thing, but what I saw of it, I liked, or with Young Justice. But the current HBO show and Young Justice are really they're both kind of Young Justice-y, because Superboy's not an original Titan, Connor Kent. I like the character, but he's not an original Titan. Tim is a Young Justice Robin, not a Titans Robin. There again, I like the actor. I think he does a great job. But I too would like to see a show that's focused on the core group of the Titans and then brings others in here and there. I do think this season has been better in that for the first 3 seasons, it seemed like every time they introduced a character, the forward momentum of the story arc came to a dead stop while we had an entire episode that was an origin story for that character. And so I felt like the season was choppy and went in fits and starts. So I would like my favorite to be the HBO Max series, because there are a lot of things I like about it, but I can't go with it. And that's kind of a long-winded way to say that. We've blown through an hour. is there anything anybody would like to talk about before we close up? And I think, Steve, we're back to you.
Not a whole lot. I would say, like, I would like for them to do a proper Titans adaptation. I agree with you that the show has some really good actors, and honestly, Brendan Poitz is probably the best Nightwing I've ever seen. I think that guy's really, really great. I just wish he was in a show that was written well, treated the characters well, and didn't do things like kill Donna. And also in the comics as well. I just, you have all these wonderful characters. You have this rich and storied legacy, and just seems like nobody they put on there can get a consistent run that can compare even remotely with the greatness of the past. And it doesn't have to be that way. I would like to see the Titans have their resurgence. I think they're long overdue for it.
Okay. Ange?
I'll just echo what you said about that Donna Troy episode in season 1. As I said, I've always looked at Donna as kind of like the soul of the team. And in the middle of this dark first season, there's this episode where she shows up and it's kind of like, what the heck is happening here? Let me try to help you guys. Has that great line where she just looks at Robin and says something like, older, smarter, prettier, something like that, right? Which is just like, that's just like candy, right? So I'll just say that was just a great episode, and I thought the actress who played Donna in that show was just that's like comic book page come to life. I think the problem with the Titans right now is that are the Titans Dick and Corey and Gar and Raven and Wally, or are the Titans Cassie and Tim and and so I think that for a comic to happen now, you either have to say these are the Titans and these are the new Titans, or you have to say we're going to make an amalgam of this, because it always seems like they're trying to elevate those Titan characters now to the Justice League. But man, I would love for there to be a Titans book on the shelves that I would say this is a great writer, a great artist, and a great makeup team. I'm like ready. I just haven't had it in a while.
Okay. Elektra?
I don't know that I've got a whole lot to add right now. I love team up books even more than I like, just one character at a time. This is just sort of my sweet spot. And I've been a huge fan of Justice League and Titans throughout their runs. So just having something on TV right now, it has researched me to go back and start reading my old books again.
Wayland?
Actually, I'll go out with a bit of a very obscure Teen Titans trivia. Donna Troy is one of the very few characters that was actually created by mistake. There was an old Wonder Woman story where she was temporarily de-aged, and someone read part of that story and thought that younger Diana was a separate character, and that's how Wonder Girl ended up sort of getting created. And that's, in my opinion, that's why one of the reasons why her history has been so screwed up ever since, is because she started off with a mistake and then they never quite nailed down what they wanted to do with her.
Kristen?
Yeah, I was gonna say, definitely I agree with everyone else about the Wolfman Perez run is aces. There was some stuff that I liked in the 1999 run, that started in 99, that Devin Grayson started writing. I thought that some of the earlier parts of that one were very good. I really like it when I can tell that the author of a book did their homework and read the stuff that came before. So I love that. I think it's a two-parter in there where the original Titans go to the island and it's the gargoyle attacking them again. That I really love that one. So that makes me like that run. So yeah, there's good stuff to be had. And they did do the Titans Young Justice for a while, and then Outsiders and New Teen Titans. So I think that DC could do it. They just, I don't know, need to be motivated to do it.
Yeah. Chris?
Just probably an hour ago almost, when you were talking about how you like the brother-sister relationship between Dick and Donna, and I was thinking about that moment in the TV show that Ange mentioned a couple of minutes ago when you said that, and that's maybe is the highlight of the whole live action series for me. And I haven't seen the current season, so maybe there's something I would like better in there, but that was a real high point of that series. And I wish they could have had more moments like that. And had the show could have been more tonally like that and less murdery or people having to use the F word in every other sentence.
Well, I can't add anything to what you all have said, but I will add on a different note. Some people know I'm a reporter for the Daily Dragon, and I covered the Titans panel this year. And one of the nice surprises was that Ryan Potter, who plays Gar, turned up for the second panel, which I just went to watch. But it was obvious that Connor Leslie had put a lot of time and effort into learning about Donna from the way she talked about Donna's origin. I mean, they said to her, well, we're going to use the comic book. She said, which Donna Troy am I playing? And they said, well, the one from the comic book. And she's like, which one from the comic book? And so, I sitting in the audience, I thought she really dug into this character. And I guess actors always do that when they get a new character. But Donna is such a convoluted character in some ways that I really was impressed that she had done that. So if that's it for everybody, we will close out. We'll go around. Please tell people where they can find information about you. If you've got something recent or upcoming you'd like to highlight, this would be a great place to do it. And Ange, we'll start with you.
At least for the time being, I'm still on Twitter at Dr. Ange70, but I have been running a Supergirl fan blog since 2008. If you just type Supergirl blog into a Google bar, you'll get there. It's called Comic Box Commentary.
Okay, Elektra?
Elektra Hammond. You can find me at untilmidnight.com and look for me on Mastodon.
Okay, Wayland?
I also on Twitter, at least for the time being. I'm at Wayland Smith 1. I'm on Facebook. I think I've recently signed up for Hive and a few of the other newer ones that are popping up. I write reviews for all of the superhero-based TV shows and movies for a site called comicbookclog.com. And that would include the Titans, although I'm behind on the current season, so those aren't up there yet. Book 2 of my Superhuman Mercenary series, Wildside, Old Gods and New Drugs, came out this past summer. I'm in the middle of writing book 3. And I'm out there.
Okay, Kristen?
I'm not on Twitter. I'm not really on social media. If you like medieval history, I just published a biography about a medieval queen called Anne of Bohemia. You should check it out if that's your thing. Also, a few years ago, back in 2015, I edited a book about Dick Grayson called Dick Grayson Boy Wonder. So you should check that out if you feels like that's more for this group.
Chris?
I don't have much of a presence on social media either, but I am the central mailer of Interlac, paper-based APA devoted to another DC super team, the Legion of Superheroes. And we have a Facebook group. So if you're interested in learning more about Interlac, join the Interlac Facebook group.
Steve?
Yeah, I think I talked a little bit about the stuff that I do at the top of the hour. So you can find me at Shadewing on Twitter. My book-related stuff is at Revelation Comic. And I also do reviews for Comic Crusaders from time to time. I just did a review of the original Willow movie just to prepare for the upcoming Disney Plus show. So, check that out.
Okay, and you can find me at nancynorthcott.com. I have a Facebook author page that I don't really know how to use because Facebook changed how it worked and I haven't figured that out yet. I am still on Twitter and probably will be until one day I go to log on and it's not there anymore. And I'm in the process of trying to find some alternatives to that. So I'm at Nancy Northcott at Twitter. My website is www.nancynorthcott.com. And early this coming year, I will have out the 3rd volume of my Boar King's Honor historical fantasy trilogy, which is a World War II story, and it'll be published by False Death Books. And of course, you frequently see me here on ConTinual. We'll always have comic book content for you because we're the convention that never sleeps. Thank you to everyone who participated in the panel, and thank you to everyone who's been watching. And thank you to our sponsors, Heroes Aren't Hard to Find and Heroes Convention. For more information, visit heroesonline.com. Thank you, everyone.